This is week 29 of your 2019 adventure of working towards accomplishing your dream. This year-long process goes through a lot of ups and downs, times of fluidity, and times of challenge. So today let's look at a tool that can assist you greatly in understanding and managing challenging times. Do you even know about biorhythms? Well, today we're going to look at this really valuable tool. Hi, welcome to Harmony Enterprises. I'm your host, Carrie Fox, and this show is all about looking at biorhythms, and I hope you leave this session with some very helpful information. Biorhythms are the energy cycles of your being, a 3D human being. These cycles are with you every day, whether you know about them or not, or whether you believe in them or not. Basically, we all have times of low energy, times of high energy, and times of being a little off kilter. Your biorhythms are one of the reasons you experience this. So let's look at that today. But first, let's review Harmony Enterprises' motto, that we embrace and encourage living in harmony with the infinite wisdom that dreamed you into being. Which means this week, divine wisdom, including that part that is you, gifted yourself with energy cycles to ebb and to flow. So let's get to it. Let me tell you a little bit about how I got interested in understanding our biorhythms. Have you ever found yourself walking across a flat surface and you seem to trip over something, but there's nothing there? Well, I do, and I have. Have you ever noticed that some days your ability to absorb information, even extremely technical information, is really easy with no problem, and then on a different day you just can't seem to grasp what someone is trying to tell you? Well, I have. Understanding just a little bit about biorhythms will help you understand why these things happen. Now, at the time of your birth, the trauma of your birth causes some energies of your being to start. The three most common energies that people keep track of in biorhythms are your physical, your emotional, and your intellectual rhythms. As you can see from this chart, the wavelengths of all three are different from one another. The physical here is indicated with a green line, and it goes through a cycle of starting at center, moving upward and downward and back to center in 23 days. The emotional is shown in red on this chart, and it has a 28-day cycle. And the intellectual, shown here in blue, has a 33-day cycle. So this results in different wavelengths that do not go up and down together, so your chart may look something like this. I'm going to start with looking at a typical physical biorhythm cycle. And this is associated with coordination and strength and well-being, your physicalness. Very simply, when your physical cycle is at the top half of this chart, above that center line, you tend to have a lot of energy. You can get a lot done. And then when it's in the lower half of the chart, you have less energy. You may find yourself feeling like you need a nap. And here's the interesting part about biorhythms. The day that your physical cycle line crosses that center line, that's the horizontal line going from left to right, it says 0 over on the right-hand side. Okay, the day that your cycle line is crossing that line is commonly referred to as your crossing day. And that's the day that your physical cycle is either going from higher to lower or from lower to higher. And guess what? Those are the days that you might be walking across a smooth surface and trip. Now, the easiest way for you to remember that those crossing days can be kind of glitchy is thinking about them as shifting gears. You're shifting from forward to reverse on that day, or from reverse to forward. I call it also a glitch day. So now let's look at an emotional cycle. And emotions are about your creativity and your sensitivity, your moods, your perceptions. And when your emotional line on this chart is above the center line, you're probably feeling pretty confident and secure. Let's say someone tells you that they don't particularly like the look of the clothes that you have on or the color of the clothes you're wearing. Your response might be, gee, I'm really sorry that you don't like it, but I do. This is my favorite dress or jacket or color or whatever. But when your emotional cycle is at the lowest half of the chart and someone says that to you, you probably will get hurt feelings. But the day that your emotional cycle is your emotional cycle is crossing that center line, on that day, your reaction to someone saying like that to you could be instant tears, like you're being stabbed in the heart. That's your off-kilter day. And the third cycle I'm going to talk to you about today is the intellectual cycle. Being alert, having analytical functioning, logical analysis, your memory or recall, communication skills all have to do with your intellectual cycle. So intellectually, when your cycle is at the top above that line, that's when you can easily absorb information and theories. And when your cycle is at the lower half is when you might be experiencing trouble absorbing information. And then on those days when it's crossing the center line, when you're on your crossing day, you can read the same sentence over and over and over, trying to understand it. Now tell me you haven't been there. It was probably your Biorhythms intellectual crossing day. Putting it all together, and again, these three are only the most commonly tracked cycles. There are others that you can investigate, and if you decide to really get interested in understanding and using the knowledge that these biorhythms can show you, you'll learn more about them. But in this chart, I want you to notice that on the left-hand side, or on this slide, the blue line is for physical, the red line is for emotional, and the green line is for intellectual. And notice how they flow up and down and have crossing days. But let's add here, looking at the vertical lines of a chart. Over on the left-hand side, you will see that there is on the lower left, it says, this is a target date of 7/24/2019, and the day of birth of this person is January 1st, 1986. And if you look at this chart, there are vertical lines, and this is a full month. So that date that says a target date, what date were we looking to see where her biorhythms are? Notice the line in the center that's brown. Look at the bottom of it, and it says 7/24. So commonly when you go to look at your chart, you will pull it up for a month. Some people pull up more, some people pull up less. And the day you're looking for will be in the center of the chart, and you can see where your biorhythms have been, when they crossed over, and what they're going to be, and where they are today. Now, I also notice in the bottom left-hand side of this chart, it says that this chart was put together at biorhythm-calculator.net. Now, this is the chart that I use most often, but I do have several others that I use too. But this is easiest to show on the slides because it's a white background and the lines are nice and colorful. So we started this post today because, as it says in the top line, some times are harder than others. And that means things like trying to stay on track and trying to keep your enthusiasm up. So sometimes are challenging. And to get things done and to put your effort and work towards your dream, it helps you to understand that. And I know that you know that it's natural for you to have days of more or less energy, and it's days that are easier or harder intellectually, and that there are days that you feel stronger or weaker emotionally. In essence, your biorhythms can help you know when those days are going to be, can help you have a reason when you're feeling out of sorts. And I'd like to add a few more pieces of information about biorhythms before we leave this subject today. One is that biorhythms are not the only thing that influence you. There are astrological influences and, of course, the personal experiences you may be having in your life, like something going on with your spouse or a child or at work. So let me add a little more here. Let's look at the crossing days on this chart of an emotional cycle. Now, typically, if all other parts of your life are running smoothly, the time that you may or may not feel a little off kilter would be the 2 days on this chart that the cycle is crossing that center line. On the left-hand side, it's crossing from above the line to below the line, and on the right-hand side is the day that it's crossing from below the line to above the line. Those are the days that you're shifting gears or can have a glitch day or be a little off kilter. But if you have a lot of other stuff going on in your life, other times or points on the chart can feel extreme also. You know those blue days when you feel like you just want to cry but you don't know why? And you have the feeling of tears right behind your eyelids? Well, look at this chart and notice that at the very top of the chart, around July 10th, you're at your peak emotional level. And you might find when other things in your life aren't very stable and there's a lot of stuff going on, you may have an emotional day up there too. And way down at the bottom at 724 is the lowest point of this person's emotional cycle. So sometimes if everything is not going all right, there may be more than just your crossing days where your biorhythms are important. You may find yourself emotional on a high day, emotional on a low day, if you have lots of other stuff pulling at you too. I hope that makes sense to you. I really enjoy having my chart to look into, but I want you to know that I did not jump right in and accept biorhythms as being true, because I'm an investigator. When I first heard about biorhythms and started learning more about it, I wanted to test it. So this is what I did. It was back in the 70s, by the way, so I have decades of using and teaching people about biorhythms. I asked my two best friends if they would do an experiment with me, and I made 3 year-long charts, one for each of us, and we agreed to not look at our charts in advance, but when we felt something of note, something physically, emotionally, or intellectually, we would notate that on our chart, and at the end of the year, we'd compare our actual experiences to the chart. Now, 2 of us had ups and downs and glitch times consistently, maybe a day plus or a day plus or minus our glitch day. However, the third person was consistently off by 3 days. Now, our conclusion was that at one time in her life, she had been involved in a very dramatic car accident, and that it must have reset her rhythms. So she knew when she looked at her online charts, she had to make a 3-day adjustment. Now, I'm telling you that because if you should start using biorhythms, you might want to get a baseline of how closely the chart applies to you or your significant other or child or coworker, however you're going to use this chart. Don't just naturally assume that the days it's going to be showing are right. Most of the time that's true. But if you've had an electric shock treatment or something like that, it could have reset your biorhythms. So give yourself some time, maybe a couple months, to check to see how well the chart fits you. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so I also want to add that when I check my chart, it is accurate, plus or minus a day, over 95% of the time. So how to use your chart in planning ahead. When a couple is considering sitting down to have a deep or challenging personal conversation, it helps a lot to have you both at your best, or to know if one of you is going to be at an emotional crossing or high or low, or if one of you is going to be physically fatigued or mentally challenged to understand the concepts of what you guys are going to talk about. It helps tremendously. And years ago, I worked for a large corporation and was one of the only or few women in the department that I was in. So if a meeting was scheduled that I was going to be at, and I checked my chart and found out that I was going to be at an emotional crossing that day, I considered it to be pre-warned and aware that I needed to keep myself under control in that meeting. Same thing if we were going to be doing some troubleshooting, something very technical. This particular company, I was in the training department for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in commercial buildings, so we did a lot of technical stuff. I would check if we were going to be doing that kind of troubleshooting in advance, where my head was going to be, where my mental capacity was going to be, if I was going to be sitting down with 15 engineers and we were going to be troubleshooting stuff. I also used biorhythm charts when I had to schedule an operation on one of my eyes. I have good vision in only one eye, and that was the eye they were going to operate on. So I wanted the best influences and forces to be on my side. I found out the surgeon's birthday, and I calculated both his and my biorhythms, as well as astrological influences, and I scheduled the surgery at the best time for both of us, including my healing time. The result was, not only did the surgery go very well, but I had one of the fastest healing times they had ever seen. So that's it for week 29. Sometimes are better than others. And that sometimes you are just feeling blah, and there just might be a reason for it. Now, I do not normally do this, and as you probably know, this is the place in my presentations where I usually give you a link to a cheat sheet or an ebook. But today I'm feeling like some of you may want to learn more about biorhythms, but just don't have the time to learn more, or would like to add using biorhythm charts into your life, but want to or need to do that in the quickest and easiest way possible. So I'm going to offer some of my time, if this doesn't get out of control, and I don't think it will, to help you do that. Send me an email at bio.carey@harmonyenterprises.net. and we'll discuss how much you want to do, i.e. is it just a chart for you or is it for family members, etc. And I'll give you an estimate of time and cost. I expect for most of you that'll be an hour or two. And I'd be glad to help should you feel that need at this particular moment in time. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you've learned something today that will enhance your journey to accomplishing your 2019 dream. And until next time, I am Carey Fox with Harmony Enterprises, reminding you to live in harmony with the infinite wisdom that dreamed you into being. Bye now.